Welcome to the Colts is King podcast. I'm your host, The Duke, and here's my co-host, Rambling Bone.
Hello again.
And today we're doing proper cinema. But before we get into what we're covering today, what is it we do here, Mr. Bones?
Well, here on Colt is King, we do not cover proper cinema. We cover cult movies, which are sometimes proper cinema. A cult movie is typically a movie that is not very well known except among the in-group. It's cult, and we try to spread the joy of these movies to a much wider audience.
Yeah, you see, if you listen to this podcast, you're not some rube. You're in the in-group now.
Yeah, you're part of the club.
I'm not saying that makes you better than other people, but maybe.
Certainly makes you better than some.
And today we're talking about one of the finest films ever crafted, 1962's Eegah.
One of the few cavemen movies we have.
I don't want to hype it up too much, but it's definitely in my top 5 caveman movies.
Yeah.
So, did you make your top 5?
I can only think of movies that feature caves and also feature men, but movies explicitly about cavemen is not a genre I'm well versed in.
Oh, we should watch Encino Man.
Oh, yeah, you're right. I guess that'd be my number one.
Encino Man. Okay. Well, let me go ahead and give you the synopsis, and then we'll get into the goodies here.
The deep synopsis of Eegah.
So, we have a character, Roxy, and she's driving around in the California desert when she accidentally hits a caveman, a giant, as they tell us many times. Of course, spoiler alert, he's Eegah. Okay? So, she tells everybody, he leaves, and she tells everybody that she's seen a giant, and nobody really believes her except for her father.
Well, her father doesn't even really believe.
But they find a track.
Yeah, they find a track.
So he goes to investigate. Unfortunately, though, after he's been missing for a while, Roxy and her boyfriend Tom fear the worst, and they go out after him, only to discover he's been captured by Eegah, who then captures Roxy. And let's just say that he's really into Roxy. Hijinks ensue. What do you think? Good enough?
That's good enough.
Okay. Where to start with Eegah? I almost think this might be a fun one to start cast and crew.
Yeah, let's start there.
There's a lot of interesting things going on. So, Eegah was made for like no money.
I think I saw a figure saying 15,000.
That's what I saw. It was kind of made for the drive-through crowd in mind, but more so...
You mean the drive-in crowd? They might have also hit the drive-through.
What's a movie without a burger?
Yeah.
The reason I bring this up first is because this was it was made for the drive-in crew, but it was also made because the father of Roxy is actually the father of Tom.
Arch Hall Sr. and Arch Hall Jr.
respectively. This would be a kind of a short series of movies that they would make. I don't believe the actress who played Roxy was really actually an actress at all. A lot of times, Arch Hall Sr. would just cast friends, family, secretaries, just anybody he could, because he owned his kind of like small production company.
If I remember correctly, his production company, Fairway International Pictures, was literally just his house.
Pretty much. So I think he kind of saw his son as being like, the next Elvis.
He at least wanted him to be some sort of teen idol.
Right. And we'll see that because in some of the other movies, but also this one, there are several times where we're treated to Tom's guitar stylings. And let me tell you, Tom's good. He's so good that when he's just singing and playing alone with his guitar, he can play all of the other parts and the backing vocals.
Tom Arch Hall Jr. has all of the charisma of a wet knapsack. He is so incredibly lame and dorky. It just doesn't work. It doesn't work at all.
Whoa, wowie, wow. How can you say that? Tom also says that, along with every 50s, 60s, I guess it'd be the 60s, but every, early 60s-ism you can think of, he says. Which is, then every time Robert the character played by his father has to be like, "What do you mean by that?"
Yeah, so Junior plays Tom. Roxy is played by Marilyn Manning, and then her dad is played by Arch Hall Sr.
Yep, and which is also funny because despite the fact that they are supposed to be father and daughter, there's more chemistry between them than there is between Roxy and Tom.
Hence,
Would you agree with
yeah,
that?
he's, again, all of the charisma of a wet knapsack. He is a charisma vacuum.
Well, I tell you
She's
what,
also a charisma vacuum, actually. Arch Hall Sr. and Eegah. I don't even care about Arch Hall Sr.'s character, but he's much easier to watch than our two main characters.
well,
And you mostly just want to see Eegah.
well, and to be honest, Arch Hall Sr. did have a little bit of movie experience. He was actually an interesting character. So the way I've heard him described is he was like a real life cowboy back in the day. Like he could actually speak the Sioux language and had a Sioux name. And then he did everything from like radio to he later was in the Air Force. And then he would do stuntman work at some point, and he kind of fell into acting from there. So he did. I'm not saying he had any major parts necessarily, but he did have some acting experience, unlike everybody except for our friend Eegah, played by Richard Kiel, and he hadn't been in much, but this was not his first outing.
You know, the thing that surprised me the most about Arch Hall Sr. was actually that he wrote the script for the Corpse Grinders, which I haven't actually seen that yet, but that's one of those cult movies that you see the poster of constantly.
Right.
It's about people feeding cats dead bodies.
Another piece of classic
It's
cinema.
classic, yeah. So he's got Eegah and then that.
Well, and I can cover Maryland and the Arch Hall Jr. and Sr., what they were in, pretty much all together, because they did not act outside of this little series of movies for the most part.
There was a few, like I saw with Arch Hall Jr., there were still projects that Senior was involved with, but he wasn't like writing and directing.
Right, but he had his hand in all of them
Mhm.
in some way or another, and those included The Sadist, Wild Guitar, Choppers, and I believe there might have been another one. Oh, my favorite one as far as the names go, The Nasty Rabbit.
Actually, so Junior, after the 60s, he stopped acting and he became an airplane pilot.
Right, and before that, though, which I thought that was cool that he did, especially since his father was a pilot,
Mm-hmm.
but he also was in a rock band called The Archers.
Well, I wasn't like Archie and the Archers.
It might have been Archie and the Archers.
It was,
but they were
yeah.
really, they really thought they had a star on their hands. Second coming of Elvis, baby.
He at least could have been, as good as the Archies.
The Archers were not as good as the Archies as far as I know. You know what? Maybe we'll go back later and we'll listen to them. Maybe it really like they were onto something and the world just didn't catch on to their sound, man.
Actually, fairly recently, in 2018, Junior was in another movie. However, you can just sort of look at it and know that this was a very independent direct-to-streaming service type of ordeal.
Do you remember what it was called?
I did not even bother to write it down. Trust me, it didn't look good.
You know, though, and I'll reference this more as we get into later production, but I did find a website, Offbeat, had an interview with Arch Hall Jr. We should link that in here for people who are interested, but that's where I'm going to pull some of these stories from.
Mm-hmm.
The person over here who's had the most notable movie career was Richard Kiel, and he plays Eegah. Legitimate giant of a man.
7'2".
Right. He suffered from gigantism, but honestly, I was surprised that he was as mobile as he was for so long. While he got his start in movies like Eegah and Giant of Thunder Mountain, his most notable role would be as Jaws, the James Bond henchman in both The Spy Who Loved Me and Moonraker, one of the few villains outside of like Blofeld to appear in multiple movies. You could also see him in Happy Gilmore, as the boss of Happy in the beginning of the movie, and then you can also see, or you can't see him, but you can hear his voice in the movie Tangled.
He was also in a very famous episode of The Twilight Zone, and an episode of the most famous television show of all, Emergency. He did a lot of television.
He did. I mean, where else are you going to get a guy who looks like him? You know what I mean?
Yeah, see, that was something I was kind of surprised about, because it feels like people who are really short or really tall tend to have some trouble getting work, but he was able to find that niche every single time to where he was acting very just all the time.
Well, and it probably helps that, especially even later in his career, and maybe even in this movie more so than most, that he did have some acting ability. So
Yeah, he's not a bad actor.
Right, so not only does he have kind of that niche of, obviously he's this huge guy, but he also has some acting chops to go with it, so where are you going to find a lot of people who've got both?
Now, mind you, he's not a great actor in this movie, but this was an early role, and also I'm sure his direction and screenplay and everything else that went into making this movie was not in his corner.
Well, despite that, he's still the best actor in this movie.
This is true.
Which, it's kind of interesting. He kind of had an odd path to fame. He had a bunch of different roles before, or a bunch of different jobs, I should say, before he ever got into acting. These included being a door-to-door vacuum salesman, a bouncer, and selling cemetery plots were some of the ones that I found. So he kind of took an odd path to fame.
I saw that too, and I thought it was funny, the vacuum cleaner salesman. Well, it feels like a lot of his roles where he's not just the bad guy, it's always played as he's super intimidating because he's 7'2". So now apply that to real life. Someone knocks on your door and tries to sell you a vacuum. You're going to buy the vacuum.
Yeah, you want to keep your limbs, you'll, I mean, look, if Jaws came to your door and is like, buy this vacuum, are you going to tell him no?
Definitely not.
I gotta say, though, he was, of course, cast well, but another thing was it just me, or does Tom seem a lot younger than Roxy?
The film quality's not exactly great, but he does seem maybe he looks more like a young high schooler than she. She looks like she could be playing somebody in their, like, college years, maybe.
Right.
Yeah, no, it's not something that really jumped out to me, but if I'm really looking at it, then yeah, maybe.
That was just a thought. I had a lot of random thoughts that I wrote down just watching the movie. I'm like, huh.
One thing that surprised me is that the movie, now, don't think I'm crazy here, was surprisingly competent.
Yeah.
Or more competent than I was expecting it to be. You could hear things. One of the worst sins a bad movie can make is just horrible audio.
And you'll see a lot of these on, like, Mystery Science Theater, which this one was on Mystery Science Theater at some point, is that they don't have, like, proper, because it's not like a Studio B movie, they won't have proper recording equipment, or I don't know if they don't know how to edit or what, but you'll have movies where you can't hear what's going on and you have no idea what's going on at all. And it just makes movies unwatchable. Bad audio is like the worst sin a movie can commit.
Except for all the other worst sins that you could commit.
I mean, sure, but for me, I mean, assuming that, we're not watching something just utterly, completely toxic, like nuclear thermal garbage, if I can't hear the movie, I can't interact with it at all.
It's much easier to watch a movie that looks bad than to watch a movie that you can't hear where the audio sounds terrible instantly.
And especially since none of those old movies are ever going to have subtitles available for you, so you just have to guess what they're saying.
And they did figure out how to do ADR, so there is several times where the dialogue is very obviously recorded in a studio room, i.e. senior's house, then...
Well, some of it, I know for like an echo chamber, they used the women's restroom at like a little business they had.
Now that brings up a lot of questions for me, because what I said was very reasonable. You go to your home and hide in a bedroom and record audio. Taking some audio equipment into a ladies' restroom and well, I guess you said, was it Echo?
Yeah.
Okay, that makes a little more sense, but...
Well, it's funny because I was reading Archibald Jr., talking about this movie, well, just movies in general, and so it's not just that they had outdated equipment. The equipment they had was not only outdated for 1962, but a lot of it was just stuff that anybody could buy. Like, there wasn't any specialized equipment here. It was all stuff that you could just go out and grab. In fact, Eegah's voice, which, might I add, throughout the movie, is very obviously dubbed over. They literally, I think they had Richard Kiel or somebody talk, recorded it, in slow motion or something, or slowed down on one tape recorder, and then fed that into another tape recorder, but having it sped up.
That reminds me, one of the strangest creative decisions is just the opening title sequence. It is, if I remember correctly, a foggy graveyard type deal, and you'll just hear the Eegah voice just go, Eegah, and somebody's noodling on their guitar. Well, Archibald Jr.'s noodling on his guitar.
Oh, by the way, he was also in charge of audio.
I think when I watched it, I don't know if I saw the credit. I just sort of assumed that him and his buddies, since he's obviously a musician, probably did the audio.
That's exactly how it went down.
Okay, that makes sense.
Well, and to tell you also, there were no film permits. Most of this, not most of this, but a good portion of this was just on Harpo Marx's land. Harpo actually came out, and if you don't know Harpo, he was a famous comedy troupe, the Marx Brothers, one of the biggest that there's ever been. He was asking them what they were doing, and in order to try to convince them, they told him that they were making an educational film for UCLA. Now, Harpo didn't buy this, but decided to be cool about it and let them film. But, yeah.
I'm going to use that someday.
If anybody ever questions you.
Yeah.
When the Cult is King movie comes out.
Yeah. We're making an educational film for the UCLA.
Hey, we can't do worse than the AVGN movie, so...
Well,
maybe we could.
Rock bottom does not exist. You can always go lower.
Yeah, you're probably right about that. But another thing, did you recognize the cave?
I wasn't really paying that much attention to the cave.
Well, how could you not? The most interesting scenes are in the cave. But Eegah happens to live in Bronson Cave, which has been used in many movies, including one that's very near and dear to our hearts. Do you remember which one it is?
Have we covered it?
We sure have.
Okay, movies that we've covered that featured caves.
In fact, of that cave network, I'm pretty sure it's the same, specific small part of the cave.
I have a very short memory. What?
The robot monster.
Oh, because
that's
California.
Roman's.
Okay, yes.
Where Eegah lives is the same place that was Roman's base.
I don't feel like I would be able to really. One's in black and white, and the other is in fuzzy color.
Ah, yes. Good old fuzzy color.
So
I was kind of impressed that this movie had color, because a lot of micro-budget movies in the 60s were still in black and white.
Yeah. No, I mean, even up to Night of the Living Dead was 69, if I remember correctly, and that was black and white.
Right. People don't realize how long black and white kind of stayed around. Color was a feature, but people didn't really demand it as the standard for their movies for a little while.
Especially if you're going to a crappy drive-in to watch a crappy movie.
Well, they would have been disappointed because Eegah's a great movie.
Yeah, hey, cinema, it should have got the Oscar for whatever they hand those out for.
Right. We'll talk more about the quality and interesting things about this movie, but one more thing I wanted to say about production that Archibald Jr. talked about. So they have a little dune buggy that they ride around in. So that was a 1939 Plymouth sedan that they had chopped up.
They just took the body off of it.
Yeah, they shortened the drive shaft and took stuff off to make this dune buggy. It was in no way equipped to deal with the dunes of the California desert there. So they ended up breaking the frame of it twice. They had to just gas weld it on the go. Richard Kiel wouldn't even ride in the thing because of how janky it was. And Arch Hall Jr. actually ended up flipped and like pinned under it for a short time, and they had to dig him out.
Wow.
I just thought that was interesting. And I think all of this stuff was filmed over like a week or 2 weeks, I think.
The only thing I remembered about the dune buggy, I mean, it does look like crap, and it did obviously drive like crap, but the only two things I remembered about it is there's one part where it's driving, and they show a shot looking forward, and you can see the tire marks in front of them, so this was obviously like the second take where they had already driven over.
Wow, that's how you can tell this isn't an Ed Wood movie, because there would have been no second take.
And also now I don't know much about cars, but in my uneducated mind, this was a very stupid line. Arch Hall Jr. saying the tires were full of water to give them weight and more traction. Car people, please tell us in the in the comments section.
Are your dune buggy wheels full of water?
You know, it sounds beyond stupid.
And when you're out on the road, do you have to keep welding your car back together?
But the thing is I'm ignorant, so there could be some sort of weird technique involving filling your there's no way. Okay, there's no way.
Well, I have a feeling that there's one person we see in the comments a lot who would know. So you know who you are. Give us the skinny on that, would you?
Actually, now I think about it, just about everything Arch Hall Jr. says is really stupid. He is the worst.
Okay, but Bones, we've both doodled with instruments a little bit. Can you imagine being able to play your own backing vocals?
You know, it is impressive. It is impressive.
Roxy seems to think so, because we always hear about how dreamy or how amazing his music is, because they have no dialogue with each other. Mostly, you know, when there's a fight, they argue, and then he just plays something on his guitar, and she's like, "Oh, I forgive you."
You know, I feel like there should have been more lines where Roxy's like, "Oh, you're such a great guitarist. Your booking fee is $50. You're free on Saturdays and Sundays in the California area. Phone number, whatever.
If only there was a number they could call to book you. Oh, wait, Roxy, there is.
You know, you get a lower third at the bottom with all of his booking information.
See, that if they had done that, he would have made it big.
You know, honestly, I think it would have elevated. I mean, the movie's already garbage, but adding a little flair like that would have really added to the experience of watching it.
It would have been such a low, tasteless movie that it would have been brilliant.
It's also kind of funny because this movie, typically when I think of vanity projects, I think of elderly men or like guys in their 40s and 50s who make themselves an action movie and make themselves the lead, and they get a woman who is, 30 years younger than them. But instead it's the dad, and he didn't make his son look cool at all.
No, he didn't.
Yeah.
Just even the face that I think even if look him up, if you Google it and it shows the pictures of the actors, there, he's making the dumbest face. Man, I love Arch Hall Jr.
Yeah, he doesn't even stop Eegah at the end. There's no face off between.
No, now at one point he does fight off Eegah by throwing a rock at Eegah, which Eegah should have torn this kid apart.
He's like, "No, Tom, you are so strong and cool and powerful and play guitar so well." Your booking information is.
Well, maybe he did say all that, but we couldn't tell because it was an Eegah speak.
Yeah.
The whole time, that anytime Eegah speaks, it's in this low nonsense
Yeah.
I can't do it justice, but yeah, I love Eegah.
It's not exactly coherent.
No.
Now, do you prefer your Eegah with a fake beard or without a fake beard?
Oh, with the fake beard. There's this really weird scene where both Roxy and her father have been captured. And basically, their goal is to keep Eegah entertained at all time, or Eegah will tear them limb from limb. Now, luckily for us, Eegah is very easily entertained. But at one point, because her father is injured and doesn't feel good, she's like, you know what always feel good? You have your bag here. I'll give you a shave. So she's shaving her father's face, and Eegah gets in there, and he's like, oh, caveman speak.
And so she gives him a shave.
Right. Which I think was to the movie's detriment, because Richard Kiel was still relatively younger in this time, and he looked way more intimidating with the beard. His face was too smooth.
Oh, I'm not. See, when I see him with a beard, I see a very young man wearing a very fake beard. I think the sooner they lop that off, the more normal things were.
That was one issue here. Richard could have used some like makeup or something to make him look a little more frightening, because, you know, as far as giant cavemen go, Eegah wasn't necessarily that bad looking. But also he makes sure to eat some of the shaving cream too. So
yeah,
some caveman shenanigans.
Did you see anything about whether he was eating real shaving cream or if they covered his face in whipped cream?
I didn't.
That was a question I had watching it. Was now. They could have just had him eating whipped cream, but this movie was very obviously made for nothing. So they might have just told him to say, bite the bullet.
Maybe Richard Kiel liked eating shaving cream. I tell you what, he's not around anymore, so we can't ask. But if Archibald Jr. will stoop to going with Offbeat, maybe he'll talk to Cult is King, a proper publication.
We only have one question for you. What was in the shaving cream?
Yeah, I guess our interview would be even more low effort than this film.
Yeah.
Another thing I love is there's this one part where they're getting ready to go into the desert, and they're all moving, and you hear, watch for snakes, but it's coming from off of the screen.
It's none of the three characters on your screen said watch for snakes.
It was obviously some guy doing production.
It was either somebody off screen or they ADR'd it in.
You know, they might have done that. You'll definitely remember this if you watch the MST3K version of this, because they never let the movie live that down.
Yeah, if you're watching this, you could watch it without the MST3K commentary, but I wouldn't advise doing that alone.
This is a movie, I think this is a movie you should watch, but with a friend and a six-pack.
Like multiple friends in a six-pack.
Multiple six-packs.
It's
and if you don't have friends, then the MST3K crew, would work.
Apart from that, it's not exactly a sit down and watch and really, take in the cinema.
I will say, though, there are some horrific things in this movie.
Such as?
So as far as horrifying things, not only do they have to keep Eegah occupied, but he's very occupied with Roxy.
It's a love story.
Yeah.
A star-crossed lover story type thing with a caveman.
It's a little more disturbing, though, than, King Kong, because they definitely have to come up with excuses to keep Eegah busy so he doesn't find some alone time with Roxy.
Yeah.
Actually, my favorite scene is Roxy signaling to him that, oh, we can't do that here. My father's there. And Eegah's like, oh. And then he goes and grabs his club and starts approaching the dad.
What's even weirder is just prior, Eegah got done introducing Roxy to all of his family, which are like skulls and shrunken heads. So Eegah very much seems to think that his family is alive and there. So
yes, there's a couple scenes where he's talking to his mummified family.
And no, there's no explanation. Well, they do give an explanation of why Eegah is still alive. Drinking sulfur water.
Yes.
That'll keep you young and forever alive.
Well, and their justification for having giants, right?
What was that?
It's in the Bible. The movie literally ends, was Eegah real? Yes, it's in the Bible.
Yeah, don't they quote, like, Genesis.
Well, here's the fun thing. We don't have a Bible in our studio right at this moment, but if you flip to Genesis 4:32, I'm pretty sure that chapter ends on verse 26 or something. So I don't know if it's a misquote, or if they made something up. But
He was like, I've been to church. There's something about giants.
No, I thought it's funny. Like, they didn't reference like Goliath or anything. They're just like Genesis 4:32. Giants are real, and Eegah is real.
Eegah is real. You just saw the movie, guys. Of course they're real.
Well, I guess Richard Kiel, about as big as they come, and he was real. So
yeah. Giants are real. We hired one.
That's right.
The end.
It's in the Bible.
It's in the Bible. Yeah, I think the biggest crime this movie commits is the fact that they, spoiler, they kill Eegah and don't have him walk off into the sunset with Roxy.
Right. Well, it's funny because despite the fact that Roxy has no real reason to feel any tenderness towards Eegah, especially after the way he aggressively sniffed her, which was also funny, he manages, once they escape from him, to follow her back to a party. And after just causing general havoc in the city, he picks a fight, throws one guy in the pool. People start paying attention to the fact he's there, even though everybody was blissful.
How do you not?
Did it kind of strike you as odd as when he wanders into the party, nobody knows or cares that there's a 7'2" dude running around?
You don't have a scene where everybody, is quiet and turns around and sees the giant with a club,
Right. And then the cops show up and they shoot Eegah. He didn't get much of a reign of terror.
Yeah. No, they should have either put Archibald Jr. over and had him fight Eegah to the death, or had Eegah throw him in the pool and run off with Roxy.
Roxy realizes that she really loved Eegah all alone.
Yeah, she prefers a caveman over a guy who can do his own backing vocals.
Well, there's no stopping young love.
Exactly.
I can't get over this one part where Tom's talking about taking Roxy to the party, and he's like, yeah, I've got my dad's wheels for the night. And Robert says, do they fit on your car?
Yes, that's my favorite line.
Well, the funny thing is it's like they're trying to play up the fact that Tom speaks, like in all these hip, words and slang, but they're all ones that should be very obvious. And apparently, I guess we're meant to believe that Roxy's father lives like in solitude and has never heard anything.
You see, the thing is, although I think that's how it's supposed to be taken, for me, when I watched it, first time, I thought he was just pulling out dad jokes.
I thought so at first, but then it kept happening, and I'm like, no, that's
all right. So he's either the most ignorant man on the planet, or he is nothing but zingers.
I'll tell you what, though, despite the fact of how protective most fathers are, not only is he happy to put over Tom, wonder why, but until kind of the end, he didn't really seem all that concerned about Eegah.
Yeah?
Yeah, no, encourage him, Roxy. We need to kill some time.
Yeah, I don't know how to put it. He's
very nonchalant.
Yeah, he's just nonchalant about everything. It's Roxy sees a giant, and Roxy's saying, oh, there's a giant, and he's like, well, I don't really know if there's a giant, but my daughter said she saw a giant, so I surely, I'll go check it out. And they find a single giant footprint, and he's like, well, I guess
time for an expedition.
Of course, that means there's a large footprint. Surely this couldn't be anything else other than a giant. So I'm going to get dropped off into the middle of a desert. And
he even had a little safari hat, which really sold it for me.
And the helicopter pilot, that was a weird. It's so short, but Senior gets dropped off in the middle of the desert by a helicopter pilot. And the guy driving the helicopter, I don't know if he's stoned or if he just doesn't care, but he's just so out of place. I don't know if you got any of that.
Yeah, a little bit. He didn't quite seem like he fit.
It's like, yeah, it's my buddy. He's the only person I know who can fly a helicopter, so he's going to be in the movie. And he's just having a laugh being on camera.
Which the helicopter scene didn't even need to be there.
Yeah, I don't know why.
I don't know why that was his preferred method of going into the desert. Was like, yeah, just drop me off in the middle of the desert. It'll be all right.
Maybe he didn't want to do a scene where he had to be in the dune buggy.
Some directors need to know this, but I'm going to give you guys, aspiring directors, a little tip. You don't have to show everything. It's okay for them to just end up in the desert later. We don't have to see them drive the whole time.
But hey, if we didn't show it, then he would just be telling us the entire story of how he got into the desert.
No, we don't have to do that either. People understand that you can travel from point A to point B.
People don't understand anything these days. You gotta explain it to them.
You got a director's job is to explain the movie to his audience like they're small children.
You gotta hold their hand tightly.
And another thing, not only is he nonchalant, but Roxy kind of is too. I think one of the things that holds this, for something that was marketed as a horror movie, or even like a creature feature, until they decide to shoot him, nobody seems incredibly worried about Eegah. And he's not being played as, oh, look, it's the friendly giant. It's just like, oh yeah, we'll just keep him busy until we can get away.
Yeah, they get over the whole, there's a giant caveman with a club. They get over that very quickly. In fact, the only person who seems to have any sort of urgency is Tom, as he wanders around the desert looking for Roxy and not being very good at finding her.
Well, because he knows that girls like tall guys.
I think that's it. I think that's got to be it. He's got to find her ASAP before we get the ending where she walks off into the sunset with Eegah.
Like I said, she was very distraught about Eegah being shot, but boy did she not want to be alone with him. And for good reason, but I'm just saying, wow, they were really into Eegah.
You know,
I love too that that's his name.
Eegah.
That's a great caveman name.
No, it fits perfectly. I'll give him credit where credit's due. Eegah is a good name. If I'm gonna watch a movie called The Eegah is likely to get my attention.
Right.
But I was about to say, for a movie that is, I think, an hour and a half.
Yep. It's about 92 minutes.
Not a lot happens in this movie.
No, not really.
We have maybe two times where Tom sings a song and plays his guitar.
It might have even been 3.
It might have even been 3. And just every scene is maybe long, but not necessarily full of content.
Well, right. I mean, it's not like they're like have to try to sneak conversations when Eegah's away and try to plot a way out of there. Like, they talk right in front of him because he speaks caveman. And like I said, they don't speak considerably worried about him. So it's just people kind of milling around a lot of the time.
Now, this could be because I've seen the movie many times now, shamefully, but it doesn't feel long.
No.
It's a pretty quick watch despite being a half hour or an hour and a half of nothing happening.
Yeah, here's the thing. It's kind of odd because normally, so obviously I love bad movies, but what kind of makes a bad movie like watchable versus unwatchable, right? Is usually I don't recommend ones where there's not a whole lot happening.
Beast of Yucca Flats.
Right. Like, for instance, unless you just want to see that you've seen The Beast of Yucca Flats, there is no reason to watch it. It's horrible, but it's not funny horrible, except for like a few scenes.
It's just wandering around the desert.
Yes, Tor Johnson just wanders around the desert. But this movie I would recommend because it just has a very watchable quality to it, for as crappy as it is. And it's a movie that's bad in a lot of the right ways.
Yeah, it hits the right notes. And again, the fact that Tom Archell Jr. is such a loser, such a doofus, really adds to the enjoyment.
No, the stupid scenes, the fact that he always has to whip out his guitar. he believe it or not, we've been hard on him, but he is a highlight.
As much as I like Richard Kiel as Eegah, he's not as entertaining maybe as Tom.
They could have made him more, they could have made him more crazy and animated if they
He needs to do more caveman antics. There wasn't enough caveman things Now, what exactly... I guess you could watch the Flintstones and just take notes from there as to what caveman antics should happen.
Do you think when Brendan Fraser was preparing for Encino Man that he watched Eegah to get into the role?
No, I don't think he even knows what an Eegah is, but this movie just doesn't have enough caveman stuff.
Yeah. It seems like there's a lot of things that could have either been, more frightening in quotes. You can't see my air quotes. In fact, I was actually too lazy to do them because
He didn't
nobody's
even do
watching.
them.
But they could have definitely done a lot more with Eegah. Whether they tried to go more scary or just ridiculous, he's your selling point, and his name is Eegah, so just let it go,
Yeah, he's your best actor, but he's also the least used. You have a kung fu movie and you only have one fight in it.
Right.
You're not... I want caveman exploitation, okay?
I think that needs to be the next big B movie trend, is just caveman movies. They need to make a comeback. And by comeback, I mean, trying to think of every caveman movie I can think of. Flintstones on the Rocks. Encino Man. Your Hunter from the Future, I think, kind of counts.
You see, that's the thing is, when we talk about caveman cinema, they're not typically movies solely based around cavemen. They're usually... It's like, here's a movie, and there's also a caveman in it.
Well, I think we have firmly exhausted what we had to say about this movie.
Yeah, this will be a shorter episode, because this movie is an hour and a half of nothing, except...
It's just kind of like this podcast is like 30 minutes of nothing for this one. But you know what, though? If you enjoyed this, then you'll probably enjoy Eegah.
Yes.
It's just a goofy hour and a half of nonsense. And Richard Kiel and carrying around a club.
Strong recommend.
No, honestly, though,
I'd recommend this more than any other movie we've talked about.
Except for the Giant Claw.
That's
my favorite movie.
And the Phantom.
And the Phantom.
And Cure.
He proceeds to list off our entire... I will say, I actually do recommend this, but with the understanding that you're going into a movie that's so bad it's good. But for me, some movies are just so bad it's bad, but I think this one crosses into the so bad it's good territory.
Yeah, there aren't as many funny lines as there are in some movies that are in this category, but it's got enough moments that are unintentionally humorous to keep it entertaining.
And plus, you can tell your friends that you've seen a movie called Eegah.
So, yeah.
I guess if with Eegah said and done, and don't worry, guys, I know some of you were worried after The Cure, like, wow, are they going to get intellectual on us? Nope. We've firmly thrown away those IQ points now that Eegah has made us all dumber. What are we watching next?
So, we're going to get all those IQ points back.
No.
I promise that we will not do heady movies every time I pick.
Okay, well,
I've got some bad
I might have
ones.
to go like Beast of Yucca Flats off of this so that we are all like firmly,
But I do want to talk about this, mostly because I just need an excuse to sit down and watch all of it. But I'd like to talk about Andrei Tarkovsky's Stalker.
Is that going to be a heady film?
Yes, I think it's over 3 hours, and it's Russian. So, hey, we're not doing a Japanese foreign film.
Yeah,
so.
We can mispronounce somebody else's name for a change. We got a cease and desist from Japan.
But, yeah, it's, from what I've gathered, a very deep film. So, forgive me, Duke. This will be another...
I just wanted to have this podcast where I could talk about the silly caveman movies and the guys in gorilla suits, and you keep making me think.
Yeah, well, sometimes there are cult movies that require some thought, but we will talk about this next week. Until then, thank you for listening. You can find us on YouTube, of course, CastBox, Spotify, Apple Podcast.
And if you can think of 5 caveman movies, or hell, more than this one, drop those in the comments. That's your homework.
Yeah, that
People in the comments love homework.
that really would be. I mean, I guess a Google search, but
That's cheating. No Google searches. We'll know.
and
I'll know if you Google search it.
so don't do that. And thank you for listening.
And this is the Duke signing off and leaving you with a stern warning. Watch out for snakes.